Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us. My name is Dr. Natasha Falahi. I'm the sensitive doctor, and I am very excited to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Divi Shanna. She is an intuitive coach and founder of the Intuitive Coach Training Program. She firmly believes that our healing lies within ourselves. This is something we are all born to do. So let's wake up and live miraculous lives. Dr. Divi, it is a great pleasure to have you joining us today. Welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Natasha. It's awesome to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to chat with you today. As you know, we're talking all about empaths and sensitive people, highly sensitive people, intuitive people. And I know this is one of your expertise, but I always, love to start out and hear about you and your story. If you identify as an empath or highly sensitive person and how you got into the work that you do.
It's a funny story. I always say to people it was by accident, like most things are. So I was quite fortunate. I graduated medical school really young. I was 25 when I got it. So then I was out there working in the world. And when I was 25 and working, I used to ask myself all the time, but why do people get sick? Why? Then fast forward 3 years, I got quite sick when I was 28, 29. And I got everything that nothing was a fix for. So I got chronic pain, chronic allergies, depression, anxiety, all kinds of different, kind of the non-specific things that I couldn't take something magical to get rid of it. And by now I had already worked as a doctor for 3 or 4 years. So I kind of knew, and this is years ago, so over 2 decades ago, that kind of the traditional approach of just getting allergy testing or just taking antidepressant wouldn't fix things. Not that there's anything wrong, but that was where I was at 20 years ago. So I ventured off to figure out what was going on because I could remember a day where I could walk from here to the door without pain, and now I couldn't. So I was it felt like it all happened at once, but I'm sure it was very slowly. And so my journey to recovery was slow and gradual, but involved at first yoga and meditation. And then I'm pretty type A, like a lot of doctors are, and went off to figure out how this yoga was helping and how meditation was helping me. And went off and learned how to teach yoga, opened a yoga studio, did all that for about a decade. And then during that decade, my brainwaves started to change, which happens to everybody when you're teaching yoga full time. And my intuition started to go really high. And I started to really understand that a lot of my pain was my empathy that I was picking up from my clients or patients. And then my intuition started to crank and took some intuition courses. And then I set up this business about 12 years ago. And that's where I am now. So it all started from being really sick to where I am now. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think that's a very common story that probably a lot of people listening and watching today can relate to. And also a lot of the healers and, a lot of the people who are also speaking can relate to as well. I think your story sounds so similar to mine in that you kind of just have all these mystery symptoms and it's hard to really pinpoint where that comes from. And, I know I often talk about that, like how sensitive people and empaths have a lot of illness and chronic disease. And I'd love to hear your perspective on why empaths really commonly get sick or they're in pain often.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, how we all struggle with it? I mean, I think of it as empaths, our energy fields are really open. So we pick up things. So if I put my hands on somebody and they're not well, the way I see it is literally their health issue comes through from out of their body into my hand, into my body. And especially before I knew this work. Now I know a zillion tools, so that doesn't happen as much or at all, but it's really understanding that it's all energy, which we both know. But when we go to medical school, at least where I studied, we didn't talk about that. So a lot of healers, intuitives, empaths, we all struggle from the same thing, that we're just picking up energy all day, every day. That's what I think. Yeah. And we don't know what to do with it. That's the other part.
Yeah. So, can you share some easy techniques that you've learned that can really help empaths start to decrease the volume of all of this stuff that they're picking up so they're not just like bombarded by other people's stuff?
So there's 2 or 3 different things, and I'll sort of give them in order. The first thing is to understand that everybody who comes to see you is you. There's never a mistake. So something that the person sitting in front of you, you're saying to them or helping them with is also for you. And then to remember within that we are all divine light and love. Like that's obviously something that we all know, but we forget. We're all light and love, and that's our true essence. So when somebody is coming in with, say, anger to their husband, making that up, that's a reflection of some anger that I've got. So what is it that I need to forgive? What is it that I need to bring light to? What is it that I need to bring love to? So it's using each interaction with a client or the grocery clerk person. Every interaction is a chance to forgive, a chance to bring light to. And the more you do that, the more you put light in your body where there was pain. That's one technique. The other technique is to actually recognize that our intuition has volume switches to it. Okay. So a lot of us who are empaths have a lot of clairsentience. So we feel, right? But there's 4 primary clairs. There's not just clairsentience. So sure, I feel like that's the goosebumps, the bubbles, the nausea, the hands buzzing. That's all clairsentience. We also have clairvoyance, which is to see. We also have claircognizance, which are thought inserts. There's also clairaudience, which is to hear. So what I've done that I do a lot of is I turn down the volume of my clairsentience so I don't have to feel all day, every day. I still feel. So when a client comes in, I'll get the hot and colds and the goose tingling. But I actually ask to increase the volume of my clairvoyance because to see is so much easier, or to get a thought insertion is so much easier than to feel. So that's what I do a lot, because when I'm feeling all day, every day, and I work with a lot of people with chronic pain, they'll sit in front of me on Zoom or in front of me, and I'll feel their pain. And it's like, okay, let's turn that volume, because there's actually a volume switch. Okay, guys, turn that one down, and I want to see more. And then I, get the hit as to what to say to help this client say, relieve the pain. Then when the hit comes in, I say what I say, then the pain gets relieved. So it's always being aware that those volume switches are there and where do you have them adjusted. So.
Wow. Yeah. That's so fascinating. And so you use this in your professional life, but I imagine people can also start to develop these skills and use them in their personal life too, because I think, a lot of people they're naturally healers and practitioners and stuff, but there's also people who, feel that they're picking up a lot of the stuff from their loved ones or their family members or those sort of things. So this is not just something that you can use professionally as a doctor, right? It's something that everybody who's sensitive can use.
100%. Like out in the grocery store, I know a lot of us go to the grocery store and we pick up everything through our feeling channel. So what I often say is, if it's important, let me see it, not feel it, right? And the key being if it's important, right? And sometimes I just want to be in my quote unquote little bubble and just be Divi and have my head down, right? But if there's a message for this person and the person wants to receive it, but it could just be through my heart, let me see it. Let me have the thought insertion. Not that I don't want to feel it, but like, let's turn that volume switch down. And the really big one is, what is the lesson here? What is what I'm seeing in front of me? What am I here to learn from it? Not just, oh God, I'm being inundated. So
yeah, definitely. I think, that question is a really poignant, powerful question to say, what is the lesson here? Because, there is sometimes I think this pressure to feel like, well, I need to see the silver lining here. I need to see the positive, but it's not always about just making every situation like happy and positive for us, right? We're trying to see what it's, like you said, mirroring or trying to teach us so that can enrich our life moving forward.
Exactly. And really learning how to use our intuitive channels is super important, like, because that's what happens to empaths, in my opinion, is we're highly intuitive, but it's like, oh God, is it now making me ill? Oh no, or it's making me exhausted. So how do I use my channels, my gifts, so that I can help people, serve people, but also not get whammed, get exhausted. So
for people who are kind of new and exploring this side of them, can you kind of dive into what those different intuitive channels are and just kind of give us like a quick overview of those?
Sure. So the 4 that we've already talked about, clairvoyance, to see, which a lot of people think of it in the way their dreams, but it's also just to see a vision. Okay. Clairaudience, which is to hear. And a lot of people think, I don't want to hear a voice. And often it's not that. It's walking into a grocery store and hearing the conversation next to you. That conversation is for you. Okay. Getting into a car, putting the radio station on. Clairsentience, which is to feel, and everybody's got this. We walk into a party and we know where to stand, or we know what we're feeling. We know what feels good, what feels bad. That's clairsentience. Claircognizance is thought insertion. So that's the common one, is you're out for a run and out of nowhere comes in a thought. Boom, pay your hydro bill. So the hard part with the clairs and our intuition is to decipher what is intuition and what is ours. I recently co-authored a book called You Don't Look Psychic, which is fabulous. It's a nice thick Bible that you can get from Amazon that talks all about our intuition and how to use it to help ourselves and not hurt. But once we become aware that we've got these, then we can actually ask, okay, I really, really want to work on my clairvoyance. So literally we have to ask, I want to see more. I want to see. I am a powerful seer. I'm not afraid of seeing, right? Or I want to hear the message. Give me the message. I'm not afraid of it. So the more we're open to it, the more we will receive, but we have to ask.
That's an awesome way of looking at it, and kind of helping people really distinguish which gifts they really possess, right? Because a lot of the sensitivity, sometimes can feel like a burden or a curse because we're feeling a lot of symptoms or we're overwhelmed by stuff, right? But actually there's a way of looking at it and say, this is something we can strengthen, we can take and use as an empowerment tool. And so with that, when we look at these gifts that we have, a lot of times when we have a gift, it's to help serve, it's to help bring something back, right, to others, to the universe, to the world. So what do you think is the role of empaths on this planet? Like, why are we here and why do we have these sensitive gifts?
So I believe that we're all there's more than one of us here because we're actually here to serve each other. So when my lower back hurts, for example, sometimes I can't figure it out. I can't see in my rearview mirror. So I work with an intuitive coach, a good friend of mine who I co-authored the book with. We need each other. It's so easy for me to see somebody else's stuff, but so hard for me to see my own, right? So I think as empaths, we're here to use our gifts of clairs, to use our psychic gifts to help another. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's why we've got them. And I think that we're not here on the planet alone. I think a lot of us, and I'm sure you and I can totally relate to this, we've got a whole world that thinks intuition is wrong. And yet everything is energy. Everything is intuition. There's no doctor, and you and I both know this, who practices medicine who doesn't use their intuition. They just don't call it that. There's not one lawyer who doesn't use their intuition. But it's like, why are we afraid of talking about that? We're using our sixth sense. But I actually think we're here on the planet with these gifts to help one another, to navigate life, to make it easier.
Yeah. And I think, the way you describe that too, it really makes me think of people who are masters, like masters of their craft. I feel like those people are the ones that not only developed a skill or gained a lot of knowledge or experience around something, but they're the ones that really tapped into their intuition. So then they became like superstars or masters. So it is this other sense and the skill that we have that can be developed, and everyone has it, everyone uses it, but the people who really master the skill of intuition become masters of whatever, their craft is. It makes me think of just like exceptional people through history. And, even if you think about like a great sportsman or a scientist or somebody who really had an impact on the world, you can't deny that they were following some sort of intuition, usually doing breakthroughs where stuff hadn't been done before, right?
100%. My family that I married into, we're high sports family. So we go watch a lot of sports games and stuff like that. Basketball is a big thing in my family. So we go watch LeBron James play when we're in California, and he's amazing to watch. But how does he know where to stand, when to stand, who to pass the ball to? It's all intuition.
Yeah.
It's all of it, right? The scientists of the world, it's all intuition. Each of us have it, each of us. And unfortunately, as empaths, ours is so high, but we don't know it. And we get sick, or we hurt, or we're in pain, or it's hard to walk to the coffee shop because we're going to feel everyone's pain. It's not abnormal, but rather than seeing it as a curse, how do we see it as a gift? And I know in my late 20s and early 30s, I thought it was the biggest curse ever until I really started to understand it as a gift. So if you're that person, oh my God, can I relate? And I think you can relate too, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny you brought up basketball because I was thinking of Michael Jordan, and I'm not a huge sports person. And that's the thing, I'm actually an artist and I'm a healer. And when I was, 12 years old, I wasn't into sports, but I was fascinated by Michael Jordan. And I just became such a temporary basketball NBA Bulls fan because watching Michael Jordan play was just like this, you're tapping into spirit, you're tapping into intuition, something higher where it was like beyond just sportsmanship or physical skill. It was like watching this kind of divine energy come through somebody in their craft. And to be honest, I haven't really watched sports or basketball since then, but it's so amazing to see somebody who's so tapped into that kind of innate intelligence and that intuition that they have, and just watch them do what they're doing, even if it's not something you're interested in.
100%, because there's nothing like it, right? There's nothing like being an observation of the divine through the human. So cool. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's such a fascinating way to think of this. I don't think I've talked to anybody else in the, the empath highly sensitive summit about like NBA basketball players, but it's, it can show up in any field, right? Like you said, it could be mathematicians, it could be somebody who's a creator or a gardener, or like you said, a lawyer. You can have somebody who's so tapped into that intuitive part of ourselves, and it just comes out in everything that they're doing, right?
you watch them move through the world, and it looks like everything they touch turns to gold because they trust and they move. And when something icky happens, they learn what the energy is that they're here to learn from, and they shift and embrace it and keep moving. And you're right, it's everyone. And I sometimes wonder what the world would be like if more and more of us are tapped in, if more and more of us wake up our gifts, if more and more of us use them all the time.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I think that actually, this is kind of just a totally different topic, but I think that's why people are so fascinated by celebrities, or people who, really are like, we watch them because there's this inspiration of, whether it's like, you think it's Hollywood celebrities or just somebody who's just prominent in their field. We're fascinated by the fact that they are just so connected to their purpose and connected to who they are authentically to show up and serve others in the world. So, as empaths, that's what, our purpose is. And what you're talking about here is to serve others and just find what those gifts are and develop them.
100%. And I firmly believe that the world would be a very different place. Not that we're in a bad place now, but what would the world be like if more of us were stepping into our gifts and using them and helping each other? So
yeah, absolutely. So, I think if somebody's watching or listening today and they can understand that concept of like, wow, if I really tap into this part of myself, I can get to this place where I can have an impact on others in the world and serve and show up that way. But sometimes it's so hard to feel like we can get there, that's so far away from our reality or our life, because we're just experiencing a lot of symptoms, a lot of problems, a lot of suffering. So, I think a lot of times one of the major things is energy. Like, people just feel tired. For people who are still searching for that gift in themselves, really trying to find out how to bring it out, talk to us a little bit about why empaths get tired and what they can start to do about it in those early phases of shifting that.
So one of the reasons we have a lot of fatigue is because we pick up each other's energies. And just a few minutes ago, you watched Dr. Natasha and myself banter about basketball. That's because when she was talking, before we even started talking about basketball, I could feel or see in her energy feel something about basketball. And it's funny because that's what you said, right? So it was like, that was the banter. So if you feel fatigue, the biggest things I would say are, I know y'all, probably everybody on this summit has said it, start a meditation practice. Because we all want to learn how to slow down our minds, because our minds are super powerful, but often they'll make us tired because they're like this. So number one, slow down the mind. I talk about it in the Energy 101 video series. Number two, start a journaling practice, because when we're journaling, we can mind dump so we know what we're thinking. Number three, and I hope this one really helps people, is to they're saying, bring in more light. So whether we get it or not, there is a constant energy of love and light that's heading to us. But you heard me just say to Dr. Natasha a minute ago, we have to ask. So I always say, I want to feel you. I want to feel the light that's around me. But in order for me to feel it, my mind has to be slower, and which means I have to mind dump into a journal, or I have to meditate, or both. And then when I sit in silence, if I bring that light in, I'll actually feel it. But I often can't feel it if I'm swirling. Okay. So then the more of that light that brings in, then you're going to feel a different vibration. Then the fourth step is to, and we talk a lot about this. I also teach a 1-year course for everybody, but on how to increase your intuition, how to become an intuitive coach if you choose to. But a big part of the year course is to identify, we have what's called shadows or subpersonalities, whatever word you want to do. But how I describe it is, there is a part of me who blah, 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 blah. So there's a part of me who's always caretaking my son. There's a part of me who's always caretaking. And the more you can talk about there's a part of me, then you actually have a bridge between your higher self and the parts of you. So those are the first 4 steps I would start to just really bring in light, get away from the mind dumping by journaling or meditating. And then the 4th step is to go, okay, there's a part of me that worries all the time. There's a part of me that's always thinking XYZ. There's a part of me that's always in obsessive compulsive. The more you do that, the part of me, then the more you step into light. The thing is, when we're in light, and Dr. Natasha, you know this just as well as I do, and most listeners know this, when you're in light, You actually have access to infinite light, infinite energy, infinite power, infinite love, and infinite wisdom. Like infinite, like I'm talking nonstop, which is crazy. And we can all access even a little bit of it. And those are the steps towards accessing it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's such a great actual like practical breakdown of how to get to, these really amazing places in our life. So, it's because a lot of times I think people are overwhelmed as to what they're currently feeling. Like they're just feeling that pain or that suffering. And one of that, like you said, a big part of that is chronic fatigue, tiredness, that sort of stuff, just overwhelm. And another, part of an empath's experience is a lot of physical pain, right? Like a lot of body pain. And, that kind of, whether it's vague, whether it's really pinpointed in certain areas or recurring or moving through their body, there's a lot of examples of people who are empathic or highly sensitive, really, in a clinical setting too, reporting much higher levels of pain and having a much harder time, with that experience, like getting rid of the pain and having it be just like this chronic underlying thing in their life. So tell us what causes body pain like that in empaths.
So the thing about empaths, and we all love our empaths, right? We don't want to think of it as a burden. We want to think of it as a gift. So that's step one. And every thought creates energy. And again, if you watch the Energy 101 video series, you'll see what I mean. Every thought creates energy, which creates a response in our body. And whether we're aware of it or not, we have more fearful thoughts that then create the energy response of sympathetic nervous system that tightens the body. The hard part is to go, okay, my body's tight. What was the thought? So the first thing is to go, okay, my knee pain, my leg pain, my back pain, whatever, it is just a messenger. And there's nothing wrong with going down the path of, okay, this is arthritis, this is this, there's nothing wrong with that. But Dr. Natasha and I can tell you, you'll go down that path and it's perfectly fine. And you may get some relief, which is awesome, but you'll still be exactly where we're talking right now. You'll be going, okay, I'm taking these medications. I've had this surgery, but I still have some pain. So no matter where you are in your journey, you'll have this conversation. So step one, my body's talking to me. Great. My body's talking to me. Thank you, body. My body's not evil. Tick. Okay, my body's not evil. I'm not evil. I haven't done anything wrong. My body's giving me a message of a conscious or unconscious thought that I may or may not be aware of. And that thought is then setting my body into fight or flight, and then that's creating the pain. Got it. So now I need to backtrack to figure out what the thought is. So let's try this. Let's do that meditation journaling thing that Dr. Divi talked about. And I'm going to start to notice my thoughts more. What am I feeling? And then the more you do that, the more you will be able to kind of go, oh, my body's feeling this. In general, not 100%, but in general, what I've seen is a lot of people's body pain, not 100%, but a lot of people's body pain comes from a poor relationship with ourselves. I don't like myself. There's something wrong with me. I should be smarter. I should be sexier. I should be a size 2. I should be on top of the world. I should make $1 million. I should have 10 houses. We can all relate to that, right? And that steps away from the perfection you are. So there's a thought process you got that you've been taught, could be in your DNA, it could be in your ancestry, it may not even be conscious on your part, that's creating the body pain. And that in itself is huge because now you've got something to work with. Until you know that, you don't know. But now that you know that, you can start to unplug. And again, if you watch that video series, I go through lots of different techniques and tools on how to break the momentum, how to shift thought, how to think thoughts that are more light-based, but that's kind of an overview on approach to pain.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's awesome too. And I think both of us have this experience where a lot of times people will have a diagnosis or a label, right? But it's not really speaking to what's happening underneath the root cause. And oftentimes there is a mind or body or spiritual cause to why that disease or illness or pain or symptom developed. Like you said, the body's a messenger. And in my work, I specialize in autoimmune diseases, right? And a lot of times, and it came from my personal story too, of having just vague symptoms that ended up being labeled as an autoimmune disease, but being like, well, what's really causing this, as opposed to just getting on an immunosuppressant and, quieting my nervous system so that it can't help and adapt and serve me. So when you go down and you look at the root cause, sure, there can be an infection, environmental toxin, these sort of things that stress out our body, put us in that sympathetic mode. But that mind-body component of myself and everybody that I work with that has an autoimmune disease, there is this point at which they had this thought of, I want to destroy myself, or I don't want to exist on this earth, or I don't want to take up space. I feel shame, or whatever those emotional components are. And when you think about that emotion of emotionally wanting to destroy yourself, and that translates to your immune system actually attacking and destroying your own tissue, I don't think it's possible to address an autoimmune condition without addressing what you're talking about here, that thought that preceded it, that idea of, not wanting to be healthy, not wanting to exist, not wanting to take up space. So that's just one example of how one illness is actually rooted in these feelings, these thought processes that we have. And it doesn't matter what you do with diet changes and, lifestyle stuff and whatever drugs you take, if you don't address that, it will keep coming back and giving you that message somehow, right? And what other examples do you see in your clinical practice of diseases like that coming from a thought?
So true, isn't it? I love how you shared that, because it's so, so true. I mean, most people have heard of Louise Hay's work, Heal Your Life, and she does a really great job of breaking it down. But one of the most common things when it comes to lower back pain, for example, because that's a very common thing, is often not feeling safe in your home, not feeling safe in your relationship, and not feeling safe around money, and thereby not feeling safe around yourself. So that's just a great example then, of lower back. Shoulder issues tend to be our heart chakra, fear of receiving love, fear of giving love, fear of loving, right? So you can actually break down the body and go, oh, this is that, that's this. And what I would say to every listener, and I think Natasha and I can relate to this, it's a journey. So when I was in chronic pain, it wasn't like overnight I thought, oh, it's because I hate myself. It took me a long time to figure out I did, right? And it took me a long time to figure out that, I didn't want to be here, like you said. It took me a long time to figure out that it was okay to be seen. And a long time can be a short time. But what I think of pain as, it's a gift for me to get closer to my divine. Pain is telling me that there's a thought process that keeps me away from my spirit, which is unconditional love. What a gift. Oh my God, my shoulder hurting is because I don't care about myself enough. And if I did, if I actually loved myself, then my shoulder wouldn't hurt. Holy cow, thank you, shoulder pain. And so depending on where you're in the journey, almost everybody I know who's gone through pain or illness as part of their journey looks back and goes, thank you, body. You're a divination tool to tell me I'm out of alignment with my source. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I actually we were at a dinner party, had a conversation with my husband, and he was like, it's really funny. I spend so much of my time and energy trying to avoid pain and problems and just have like a really easy, comfortable life. But when I look back on it, the pain has been some of the most transformative experiences when I went into it. And I really listened to that message. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about here.
And I just got goosebumps everywhere, right? Because so for our empaths who get goosebumps, which is, a lot of you out there, that spirit, the way I think of goosebumps is that spirit going, yes, 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 right? So think of it as a good thing, not oh God, here are my goosebumps again, right? I got huge goosebumps when he told me that story because it's so heartwarming that happened, and that awareness, and that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times people, really focus on that negative part of our life. And then we become really fear-based and avoidant, right? Like, oh, I want to avoid this pain. I want to avoid this problem. And that's really, I think, what stunts people. And that's where stunts our physiology. That's what stunts our like mental and emotional growth. And that's really where a lot of pain and disease and illness develop, because we're in that avoidant mindset, right? Rather than just, like you said, opening up to that infinite source of things that we can have access to. And it's just so interesting because we have that negativity bias, right, as a survival mechanism, but sometimes it can just go into overdrive and we can just become super fearful of things that maybe cause discomfort or pain, but really kind of reframing that. I love that you're talking about how pain isn't, the worst thing on earth, and we can tolerate it, and we can start to see pain as this teacher and listen to it so that we can have a relationship with that pain, that it doesn't cause undue suffering, and we can bring gifts and messages from that.
100%. And what I'm about to say is not meant to be rude to the medical model, but the medical model feeds into itself, right? Mm-hmm. So don't forget, guys, I'm still a doctor. I get it, but it feeds fear, right? And I don't mean to be rude or judgmental, but it feeds fear. And there's nothing, I get it. I understand it, right? So when my kid's sick, I'm scared. I get it. And what's the message here? And so it takes a bit of a turning point for most of us because we've all been raised in this model. And yet, holy cow, and over here, there's unlimited health. It's the same when it comes to money. It's the same when it comes to love. That should be restricted. Oh, when I go over here, there's unlimited love. What a concept, right? Mm-hmm. So 100%, when we restrict, we just tighten our body even more.
Yeah, I'm curious, because I love this, always discussing like how to tap into that abundance and how to tap into that, infinite connection that we all have to each other, to the universe, to that kind of life energy. But as you do exist in a medical model that is really, about labeling, kind of putting into boxes and saying like, this is who you are, or what you have, and it's progressive or it's forever. Because I think probably a lot of people listening and watching today have at some point been told they have something that's just definitive, that's not going to change, right? So how do you exist in this model and also bring in these other philosophies and tools? I know you mentioned yoga early on, and that was a big part of your journey and kind of your understanding of how to transform this and bring in a holistic view. But I'd love to hear about, how you integrate this and how you bring in other tools for yourself in your practice and for people that you work with.
So for the listeners who don't know, I'm Canadian. And so we have a federally funded healthcare system, just to kind of thread this question back. So I've left the kind of model and I work privately now, which I think you do too. Americans tend to, but whatever, doesn't matter. So I work privately, in which case I can thereby access more. But things like yoga, meditation, movement, dance, our rituals, ceremonies, all of them are a huge part of my life, right? And opening up to all of the wisdom that comes from the East and the West that we have kind of all shoved away, knowing that there's so much more outside of physical. And not that I don't shove this down my clients' throats, but a lot of my clients work with me for weeks, months, and sometimes often years. And the longer they work with me, the more that they see, oh, wow, there's a whole world out there. There's a whole world out there that I could tap into. There's a whole world out there of possibilities. And it takes time, but it's available for all of us.
Awesome. I'm really curious about this thing that you mentioned about rituals and ceremonies, because that's something that really fascinates me. Something in Western culture that I think we've lost a lot, because it's been so much about, the individual, right? So the individual, follow your path and your dreams and do whatever you want, eat at whatever time of day, sleep on whatever schedule you want. And that becomes this thing about like, that becomes my individual identity, my expression, which is amazing and beautiful. And I love that I have that experience in my life, but I also have an experience of being raised in a bicultural household and having immigrant parents and knowing a deeper cultural practice of different rituals and ceremonies. And I'm super fascinated by this idea of how rituals and ceremonies have always contributed to people's well-being, both individually and as a community, as a species, as a planet, right? So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how why they're beneficial, and why they're important for people when they lose those rituals or ceremonies in their life. And for people who maybe don't have a lot of family or cultural rituals, what is a couple practices that they can bring back into their life?
Sure. I'm going to just do another, like not a plug, but just more information. So if you do pick up our book, looks like it. The second half is all ritual and ceremonies, all of it. So like there's a whole half book here that are written for everybody, not just for people from a cultural background, but like everything from full moon ceremonies to how to gain more clients or how to, do this. So that'll be really helpful. But I also grew up in a bicultural household. And what I experienced was like my mom would fast every 3 weeks on the moon. And it just became part of recognizing that there was something bigger going on. And I agree with you. The individualization is awesome. But what happens when we light a candle? Something really simple, lighting a candle. What it often does at a dinner table is it just brings everybody together, brings the awareness that there's something different out there outside of just this physical construct, which then opens our idea up to energy, possibility. And all I did was light a candle. When I light a candle and maybe even say a prayer, when I light a candle and bring in my ancestors, light a candle and bring in the deceased loved ones without fear.
Yeah.
What starts to happen is we start to open our minds up to all of these possibilities. And all of these practices I practice actually relatively regularly. People are about smudging their homes. There's a zillion different rituals. But I think when we lose them, we lose touch with the word I keep hearing is sacredness. Because we then are just looking at this flesh and bone, and then we feed into the fear. When we see that there's so much more, and honestly, for the listeners who've never practiced a ritual, and like, they're crazy, just light a candle. Seriously, light a candle with dinner tonight and notice the difference in ambiance. Light a candle and say a prayer. Even if you don't pray, just like I bring in love. That's a perfect prayer. You will see a shift in energy. So it could be something as simple as that, or more as complicated as, though it doesn't have to be complicated, as a full moon ritual or whatever, right? Just start simple. And then as you get guided, work your way up. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think that that's such a beautiful way, because it actually just adds like ambiance to your dinner table or whatever. And it's just like nice to have those elements, but it actually is this much bigger thing where it's a ritualistic practice. And so it doesn't have to be tied to a certain culture or something your family has done for generations. It can be something that people start right now. And as long as they do it consistently and they bring awe and awareness to it, you're saying that's kind of where you experience that sacred through a ritual. And I think a lot of the things you brought up earlier too, just the examples of what people can do, is a lot of what I see people implement to create these personal rituals, like a morning ritual where they wake up and they definitely meditate and they definitely journal. And that becomes, something that maybe their doctor prescribed for them, or they just thought, oh, this makes me feel better. But that in and of itself becomes a very deeply personal ritual. And it doesn't matter if your partner does it or your whole family does it, as long as you have some level of that ritual in your life, is kind of what you're talking about. It's just helping you tap into what's bigger than us and what's more sacred, right?
100%. Gratitude journals, meditation journal. It doesn't have to be anything too religious, and because I'm not religious at all, it just has to own a grace to it. Where there is an element of knowing that there's more, or surrender to it. And when we do surrender, that's where everything happens. That's where the magic happens.
Oh, that's lovely. That is so great. Wow. This has been just such a lovely kind of, I think, well-rounded conversation too, because we're learning a lot about, the science of how diseases develop from a medical perspective, but also how that connects to our culture or our practices, or kind of that mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of our life. And so for people, that are loving this as much as I am and they want to learn more, you've given us a few examples, but can you just share with our listeners where they can learn more about this? Or, if you have, like you said, your book or programs, where can they go deeper?
Thank you. This was a fun conversation. I totally agree. We talked about everything from NBA to lighting candles. So couldn't get better than that. So check out my website. It's super simple, drdivi.com, drdivi.com. You'll see lots of links to our book, to our one-year course, to working with me one-to-one, to working with people I've trained. What I always say to everybody is it just starts with your intention and your belief and your trust. And I always say, just trust the pull, because the pull is your guides, your divination pulling you. So I hope from the bottom of my heart that this touched you and you felt some resonance, because if you're still listening, you probably did. Keep following this summit that Natasha's doing. You're going to get more and more, but follow those pulls. So yeah, just check out my website, drdivi.com. So.
Awesome. And I think you've given us so many gems, but I'm going to put you on the spot one last time. So given everything that we've talked about, tell us one thing that you'd like to leave with us today, or like one step that the listeners can do to make a change today in their own lives, in addition to the ones you've already given us.
The one that's coming the loudest, this is what I mean when I say coming the loudest, it's my intuition. I can actually hear them say love. At each moment, we can love. And there is our own thoughts, but there's always 24/7 an energy from the divine, call it from spirit, call it whatever you want, the universe, that's sending you thoughts that can give you the emotion of love 24/7. It's kind of crazy. So if you're going through something right now, and if it's really big, this might be hard, but if it's kind of small, like somebody cut you off in traffic, or something small, like the grocery lineup is really long, how can you hold this moment and bring in a thought of love? Really that simple. Because at every moment, love is there. So that's my take home.
That is lovely. And in this moment, I'm loving this conversation and I could go on for hours just kind of riffing with you. But Dr. Divi, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Dr. Natasha. That was super fun too. Thank you.
Yeah. What a great session with Dr. Divi Chandna. Thank you all for listening. We will see you soon.